So good evening, Kyria Network. We are so glad that you're joining us right now for this Kyria Zoom. If you have not joined Kyria before, there's a little bit of a Zoom. You can just hear me going off in the background. Apologies for that. You should be able to hear me again now. If you've not joined our leadership focuses before, you are so very welcome. We've been hosting these leadership focuses all year. And every month we've been looking at a different sphere of leadership. We've looked at the charity sector, we've looked at church, we've looked at business, we've looked at being creatives. And tonight I'm joined by three fabulous leaders where we're going to be talking about what it looks like to lead as a student. So I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes for those of you to join live. And the great thing about this conversation is that you can rewind and you can press play to this anytime that you want, and it will stay up on the Kyria page. It will go to our YouTube channel, and it'll also be converted into a podcast as well. So if you're just joining us now, a refresher that you're watching a 30-minute conversation with good friends of Kyria, which is Judith and Beth and Essie, and we're going to be talking about leading as a student. So I'm going to get these ladies to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get going with some great questions this evening. So Beth, why don't I come to you first? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Great, thank you, Amy. So I was involved in student leadership when I was at uni. I was on the committee first as treasurer, which is hilarious given my skill set, and then as president, and then I went back to university about 12 years after I'd left, and actually supported students who were involved in leadership through working at the chapel and the chaplaincy, and now I lead Youth for Christ's gap year programme, the year out, so involved with not students but student age young adults now as well.
Wow, good stuff. So you've done a lot in all that time, for sure. And Essie, you're so very welcome joining us from Cardiff. Tell us a bit about you.
Hi, my name is Essie. I am a final year children's nursing student at Cardiff, and my kind of leadership, what I do is I'm one of the co-presidents for the Cardiff Christian Union here in the city.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us, Essie. And Judith, tell us a bit about you.
Hello, I'm Judith. I am currently living and working up in Edinburgh. I'm interning at Edinburgh City Mission, but I recently graduated from Durham University studying theology, where I was one of the co-presidents of the Christian Union there.
Amazing. So we just nearly needed Northern Ireland, and then we've got the whole of the UK with us today. That's just like wonderful that we're spread across so many places. So folks, if you're just tuning in, we're about to start a really great, inspiring 30-minute chat all about what it looks like to lead as a student. And as you've just heard, we've got Beth and Essie and Judith, who have got lots of experience and are continuing to live out what it looks like to work and to live out their calling as students. So we've got a few questions for you ladies. And then for those of you that are watching, as you're watching this 30-minute Zoom, if you think it would be really helpful to ask a particular question to Beth or to Essie or to Judith, you can join the Zoom room at 8:30. I'm going to pop up the link there in just a moment. You can even join the waiting room right now. And there's going to be a chance to just have a bit more of an intimate, confidential little chat for 15 minutes in the Zoom room once we've stopped this live. You might be a student, or you might be working with a lot of students, and you might have some questions about what that looks like to minister and encourage the younger generation. I'm sure these ladies would be happy to answer your questions, so I will pop that in the chat just now. But Beth, we would love to come to you first with the first question. You know, we'd love to know, why would you say that leading as a student is a key importance to your faith?
So I thought about this question from a couple of different angles, and I think there's three reasons why I think kind of like for everyone it's really key in their faith, and then there's some stuff that's a bit more personal. I think the first one is it's biblically modelled. I think we see so much in the Bible about in Timothy, it talks about let no one look down on you because of your youth. So we hear it talked about. We see loads of characters in the Bible who are called into leadership when they're young, and I think that gives us a really good model for it. Which is a good place to start, I reckon, for most things. I think the second reason, kind of on a wide scale, is that it benefits the body of the church. Why on earth would we miss out as church or Christian unions or any realm that we're leading within? Why on earth would those organisations want to miss out on the leadership skills of young adults and students? It seems crazy to me that anyone would do that. And then the final thing is, and this kind of links into the more personal, is it benefits us so much as individuals and in our own individual faith. There were key people when I was growing up, and I'm going to embarrass Amy slightly with this. There were key people that gave me opportunities, actually, that gave me chances to step out in leadership where I hadn't had chance to before. There was someone at my school Christian Union who called leadership out of me in a way that that no one had done before, which was incredible. There were people like Amy were around as well to say, oh, have you ever thought about doing this? Have you ever thought? Amy gave me my first opportunity to preach. Yeah, many moons ago. And actually, I think the development of my faith by having something that people could see in me, called out of me, and sort of stirred and given opportunity, was just incredible, because it made me look even more deeply. I took my faith very seriously anyway, but it made me take it to a whole another level, I think, because I thought, right, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to do this like on a really good biblical basis. I want to do it really with integrity. I want to do it with, and so I think it called out of me something more than leadership. I think it called out of me a deeper relationship with Jesus, and it did something beautiful within that. And I think that is why it's so key to have students involved in leadership, to call that out of our students and our student-aged young adults, because there's just so much in there and there's so much to unlock. And I just think the opportunity for it is really beautiful from what I've experienced and from what I see around me as well.
That's wonderful, Beth. Yeah, that's so encouraging, isn't it? Just to see how God has moved in your life and the opportunities that he's unlocked, and then, as you say, that desire and that encouragement to do that on behalf of others as well. So yeah, that's wonderful. And Leslie, we'd love to come to you next. And by the way, ladies, feel free to chip in on the back of each other as well, and jump in with what Beth said, or jump in, Judith, for what Essie said, etc. But Essie, you talked to us about how, you've got this kind of role and responsibility with the CU at Cardiff. I'm just wondering, what made you say yes to that role? And I'm also wondering if you could tell us a bit more about how you developed confidence in your core as a young woman leader.
Well, I find the story of like how I became one of the co-presidents, it makes me laugh a little bit, because it goes back to like maybe a year ago when I was in the car park, Toby Carberry car park with my mum, and I was talking to her about how like I had a passion for evangelism and how I wanted diversity in the CU, because that was something that I felt was lacking. But I was like, no, but it won't be me though to be a part of that situation. Like, I'm not involved. Like, hopefully God will sort it out, and he'll put in place someone to do that. Fast forward a year later, I get asked, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. For the longest time, I always thought that I was like a sheep, and I'm like, you know what? I'm a great sheep. I'm not really a leader. I'm really great at following instructions. Just have me do that. But then someone around that time said to me, I think it was my young adults pastor, and she said, some of the best leaders are great at following and are great and they become leaders afterwards from being sheeps. And I'm just like, wow, okay, that's so true. And so from that point, I prayed about it and was just reminded that, like, in that moment, I thought, oh, I'm not worthy enough to be this leader, and there's so much pressure. But then I was reminded that, like, I'm not doing this in my own strength, and that, like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I love that verse. I take that with me on placement wherever I go. It's just a reminder that, like, anytime that you go into something, you know, the Lord goes with you, and it's not something that you do by yourself. And just in general, it's not something that you do by yourself, because you have a support system around you. You have your friends around you, your pastors around you, just praying for you. And just, yeah, that's kind of what helped me grow my confidence, was just reminding myself that, like, none of this I do without him. So therefore, I should be okay. He's not going to leave me. He's not going to forsake me. So yeah, that's what helped me essentially build my confidence up in regards to that.
So good, Essie. And I'm sure we've all got our stories, haven't we? Like, even in this Zoom room, and for those of us that are watching or catching up later, and where our confidence has been knocked on the leadership journey. And there sometimes seems to be so many barriers and obstacles against us, don't there? But actually, as you've just said, Essie, sometimes they're internal, aren't they? They're what we think about ourselves, and they're our own roadblocks, blocks of, like, kind of inconfidence, or our own roadblocks of mental blocks or emotional blocks that sometimes stop us from getting into that place of seeing God's call on our life. I think that kind of thing of imposter syndrome can often be over all of us, can't it, of all generations. Yeah. So Judith, you know, up until recently, you were telling us at the start that you were the co-president for Durham CU. I know you were the first lady co-president, as president, I beg your pardon. And I'm just wondering if there were, like, obstacles and barriers and difficulties that you had to overcome in that role, particularly in your role as a woman. And if there were those obstacles and barriers and difficulties, like, how did you look to overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think there is always challenges stepping into role of leadership, particularly as a woman, and particularly as a woman in Christian spheres, where often women aren't given opportunities to lead. I always find it slightly, I guess, challenging claiming that title of the first female president, because I think the reality is there were women doing the same thing that I was doing years and years and years before me. You just didn't have the same title. And so I was following in the footsteps of so many amazing women leaders. I think leading as a student is challenging. It requires keeping many plates spinning all at once. You're balancing lots of different things all at the same time. And I think also holding a level of leadership, and therefore some level of authority over your people who are just your friends and your peers, is always a difficult thing to navigate. And you are in a sort of cross-denominational Christian group. You are a visible leader in an environment where there's going to be a whole range of opinion and thought, and that can offer up a whole range of challenges. I think I found the most helpful thing I could do within those challenges was just be really, really clear on what sat within my control and then what sat outside of it. So, you know, things, what other people thought about me or the role that I was doing, that sat completely outside of my control. The wider context in which I was serving in was outside of my control. Things that might have happened previously before I stepped into that space, that was then outside of my control. And it can be hard occupying a space that women maybe haven't occupied previously, or that you know, some people don't think that you should be occupying. I think I found that I just had to really focus on the things God had placed into my responsibility. I had to be really clear and really know who I was and who those I worked with and those I served alongside, who they were in the eyes of God, and just hold tight to the truths of the scripture. And then everything else I kind of just had to entrust into his hands, because they weren't mine to hold and weren't mine to, yeah.
Do you know what you say, Judith? Like, it's really inspiring to hear you say, that's out of my control, that's out of my control, because I think one of the biggest lessons that we all have to navigate as leaders is recognizing that we don't have to control everything, and we don't have to take the steering wheel in any and every situation. And I think so many of us have fallen into that trap of over responsibility, haven't we? And I think that if there's one ongoing, because we're lifelong learners at the end of the day, aren't we, as leaders? And I think if there's one ongoing thing that we always have to return back to, it is we don't have to do everything. And actually, there are some things that are the Lord's to deal with. There are some things that are the other people's to deal with. And then there are some things that are ours to deal with. And leadership and call is about continuing to navigate what's ours to carry and not to carry, isn't it? So, yeah, really good wisdom there. Well, if you're watching this live, we're about halfway through a really great discussion about leading as a student. And we've got some really great wisdom that's already been shared tonight, but we've got about 15 more minutes of a few more questions for Beth and for Essie and for Judith. But if you're really interested in having another question, or if you're really interested in exploring a little bit more about this in a closed Zoom room, then you'll see there, if you click into the chat bar, a Zoom link. You can join that Zoom link right now. And once this live finishes at 8:30, you'll have an opportunity to join the four of us in a more intimate, confidential space to maybe chat a little bit more about what your leadership context looks like as a student. And if you're not a student, if you're a different age, but you have an interest in what it looks like to inspire and love and serve younger female leaders and male leaders for that matter, don't let that put you off. Like, come and join us and let us help encourage and inspire you as you look to lead in those generations. So this next question is actually a question for all of you. So Essie, I'd love to come to you first, if that's okay. I just wondered, from your point of view, what stories, like what stories and scriptures inspire and permission you to lead as a young person?
I think for me, I tend to be an overthinker, and it kind of goes back to the surrendering of control thing. I like to think that I'm like, okay, yeah, I've got everything, I can hold everything together, it's all good, I'm here, I'm ready. And then that can kind of create some anxiety, I think, sometimes. And so for me, in order to lead, I think peace is something that's really important. And I think remembering that we have access to peace that surpasses all understanding, and that that's something that we can take whenever. And in those moments of when you feel really anxious, or when you feel like, oh my goodness, this event is the computer stopped working, or we don't have the keys to the event, what's going on? Just taking that moment to be like, Lord, we can speak peace over the situation, Lord, and we know that this is not in our control, but we give it to you, and that you can move in this, Lord. So I think peace, so that surpasses all understanding, that scripture, I think, is something that has really helped me in terms of my leadership, for sure.
Wonderful. Yeah, good stuff. What about you, Beth? Same question.
So I think there's a couple of things I think of around this question. So that I thought of loads of different leaders within the Bible that I kind of look at and I go, their leadership when they were young is amazing. So I think about David when he first is sort of called into leadership, and there's so much that I looked at that and learnt, that idea that actually, a lot of the time when you're younger, people don't expect you to speak up, and actually you have to fight for your voice to be heard sometimes, even when what you're saying is really God inspired and God led. I think again, looking at that story in 1 Samuel where it's kind of Saul puts his armor on David, and then David says, actually, no, I can't go out like this. And so there's something as well about we don't lead like generations before us have led. And I think there's something really important about learning from that, and learning that our leadership doesn't have to look the same as it has done previously. So there's something really amazing in David's story. But I also think of I'm not going to name him because some people would recognise the name, but I've got a worship pastor at my church, and basically he leads and draws out leadership in young adults and students in a way that just is really Jesus. So when I first met him, he'd been invited along on the tech team and to do music at a festival. He's now gone on to be and he was being mentored by somebody within that who was drawing that out of him and teaching him how to kind of how to lead well, how to live well, as an example of a godly leader. And he now does that exact same thing. So although he's our worship pastor, he's on our youth team, and I see him every week getting alongside our young people and and looking at them and seeing the musical giftings and the leadership giftings in them, and he intentionally invests in people. He doesn't just draw from, you know, the established musicians, and he doesn't just draw from the people who are, you know, a bit older. He draws from, you know, we have teenagers in our worship team because this guy looks at people and says, I'm going to draw this leadership out of them. And so I just think there's so much to be inspired by in those biblical stories, but then there are so many people around us who do that so well, and who draw it out of young adults in a way that's really, really healthy. And I think that's just like, that's really inspirational to me, seeing it done so beautifully and in such a Jesus kind of flavored and structured way.
Amazing, good stuff. Thanks, Beth. And Judith, what about yourself?
Yeah, there was one scripture that particularly stood out, and it's a bit of a classic. I think it's a classic for a reason. It's 2 Corinthians 4 verse 7, which says, we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. And I think especially when you're young and stepping into roles of leadership, it's really easy to feel that our weakness prevents us from leading well. So whether that's like rooted in insecurity, or we feel like we have a lack of experience, or just like a general feeling of finding it all really quite overwhelming. But I find I often come back to this passage as just a constant reminder that God is not expecting perfection from us. And it's often in our brokenness and in our weakness that his glory is able to shine through us. I think I find it really permissioned me to be able to step into a leadership role just as I was and be completely dependent on him, and we can, you know, lead and serve, allowing his power and his spirit to shine through us and then transform us as we serve him.
Amazing, so good, such brilliant answers from all of you. And for me, like you were, there's a biblical footprint there, isn't there, of young men but also young women that have shown us so brilliantly what it looks like to serve and lead, like Mary, Jesus' mother, being one of them, who found herself in the most unlikely situation, yet she still stepped up and said yes to the call of God on our life. But, you know, I'm just aware, even in the last few years, we've seen amazing stories of young women who have stood up. I mean, I think about Amanda Gorman, who led that incredible poem in America. I think about Greta Thunberg, and so many young women that have actually taken on that role of leadership and led in a certain sphere to actually be able to make a difference in their generation. And I guess for me, like, one of the really encouraging Bible verses that we can always come back to about what it looks like to have permission to lead in all generations is the Joel 2:28 lesson, you know, where it talks about that how God is going to pour out his spirit on all people, on sons and daughters, and that those sons and daughters will prophesy, and that old men will have dreams, but that young men will see visions. And there's just such an encouragement there, isn't there, that actually the God who we love, the God who we serve, wants to affirm us and wants to give us the stories of scripture, but also the stories through our history that inspire us and permission us to lead when we're young. And I know, like Beth said earlier on, like all the way through my life, I've been privileged to have people that have said, Amy, it doesn't matter if you're 18, that was just yesterday, obviously. It doesn't matter if you're this age, it doesn't matter if you're 30, you can still do these things. And the beauty of walking a journey with Christ is we're first time on all sorts, aren't we? And like, as we grow and as we go, we get to learn new experiences over and over and over again, and the story of scripture and the story of women inspire us, and they permit us to continue to lead. Such good stuff. Well, we've got one more question. And again, if any of you ladies who are watching here this evening would like to join us in a Zoom room right now is your time, because we'll be concluding this live in about 5 more minutes. But before I do that, a little cheeky shout out actually about some resources that might help you when we're talking about what it looks like to lead as a student. And if any of you ladies have got any resources that you want to recommend, I'll hand over to you in just a moment. But I was thinking about a resource we just recently launched for Kyria. You can see it on our website, www.kyrianetwork.com. There's a brilliant resource called Allow Me to Introduce You, and it talks through 22 women leaders that spread across Old Testament and New Testament that were of all different ages, all different shapes and sizes, and about how their own stories permission and inspire us to continue to lead. And another resource that you all might find really helpful when it comes to grappling with leadership when you're young is to look at our Well page. And the Well is just full of like really good books that you can read. It's full of podcasts, it's full of videos that continue to inspire and help you along the way. And any kind of resources that you ladies would like to plug that you found helpful in your own leadership journey? Have you had books, or have you been around Christian organizations or still involved in Christian organizations where you think, oh yeah, actually they could help some listeners out here when it comes to leading? Any thoughts, ladies?
I'm gonna shamelessly plug. I'll dive in. I work for Youth for Christ, which is an organisation. We are all about seeing young people's lives changed by Jesus, and so we produce resources to help youth groups run, to help kind of build that leadership potential and draw that out of young people very early on. But also my actual job is that I run the Gap Year programme at Youth for Christ, and so it's open to people from 17 to 25, and basically what we try to do is exactly what we're talking about tonight. We try to equip and train and grow and disciple young adults that they can go out and they can influence, they can be having this impact for Jesus. And I love being part of that. I just think it's amazing getting to see the transformation that God does in our young adults from the beginning to the end of the time they're with us.
That's really great. Thanks, Beth. And Judith, Essie, any comment from you guys? No worries if not.
You gotta go for it, Judith.
I was just trying to think. I think one, I have no affiliation to this other than I went on the course and thought it was amazing, was Tier Fund do a really amazing, they call it the Emerging Influencers course, and they also, I think, have got some resources again surrounding that. But it has a particular focus on if you have a real heart for justice and a real heart, particularly for people who are experiencing deprivation or people who are living in poverty. But the course goes much wider than that, and it's about, I think some of the things that really stood out to me was thinking about who are our spheres of influence. So actually, even if we don't hold a specific role of I am the leader of this group or charity or organisation or whatever it may be, actually we are every day in just our day-to-day lives influencing the people around us in what we say and how we live. And I found a whole bunch of their stuff really, really helpful. So if it's something you're thinking about, and particularly if you don't hold a role, so maybe don't have sort of regular training being provided or a specific mentor who's guiding you through, or a line manager, then that might be a really good resource to tap into to think about how.
Really good. Yeah, great. Thank you. Essie?
Yeah, I was really struggling to think about that, really, because like the first thing that came to my head was just the good old Bible. Honestly, as in it's
you're so holy.
Come on, guys, come on. But as in, just it made me think that like when I first like started going into like leadership, I used to really rely on like finding other resources, which resources are amazing, they're incredible, but I would then kind of neglect my like quiet time and like me going straight to the Lord for things, and like going to the Bible. And so I think making sure like these are incredible resources. I'm pointing to the people, but yeah, making sure, I guess for me, from a personal perspective, like that you're reading and you're having your quiet time and that you're getting connected, because like with the CU we love to encourage people to really get connected with their church. Like CU is really low down in the priority in comparison to getting connected in church, and like really having your fellowship and your accountability and your family. So yeah, I would say the Bible and church. Those would be my words. Shout out to them.
And Essie, you just asked that question, but actually this is open to anyone. So, but it's just going to put you all on your toes because I've not primed you for this, but what would all of your advice be if you've got leaders and young women that are watching this that don't have a supportive church, or maybe they don't have support in their forums, whether that be university or the first job that they've done, or if they're a younger, mature student? Would you have any advice to those that don't feel that they've got that kind of network and tribe around them? Anyone just jump in.
I think a big thing that I was thinking through kind of around this was how important it is to seek out people who are going to be for you, and they might not always be easy to find. They might not as well be in the place where you're expecting to find them. But I think if you look around, if you explore, if you make a really concerted effort to get connected in with different networks,
like Kyria.
Exactly. It's set up and you bat it. But I think it is so important because like those women who are going to champion you and who are going to mentor you and who are going to invest in you and who are going to, if we're being real as well, who are going to pick you up when it's all gone a little bit pear-shaped and when stuff is feeling really hard, you know, and who are also going to have some hard conversations with you. Again, I don't know if Amy remembers this, but she had a couple of tough conversations with me as a young person where she had to be like, Beth, this is not what we want from you. And like,
right.
And that's like that's so invaluable. And so I think networks like this, I think any church networks you've got, any family you know who can point you in the right direction, and getting connected in with them, I think is my biggest tip for that.
Really good. And Essie and Judith, if you want to add into it with the final question this evening. So just as we conclude the live, the final question is, what would all of your encouragements to young women be when they're considering leadership in spheres? And if you want to add on to that encouragement, your advice about if they find themselves in lonely isolation. Concluding thoughts from you, Judith?
Well, my concluding thoughts were going to be do it, but don't do it by yourself. So have that network, have that community, have people who are listening to you, praying for you, holding you accountable, reminding you of your identity in Christ, assuring you of your gifting, all those things. And I think if that's feeling like it's really hard to find, I think the intentionality, actively seeking this community is so important. I'd also just say pray. God will not let you walk that road alone. He we see Jesus walk around with his 3 and his 12 and the 70. I think community is something that is really, really essential for doing leadership. So I really trust that if God is calling you to a role of leadership, he's also going to provide that community to support you through it. So I think, as you step in, as you consider it, seek God, depend on him. We can only lead from a position of first following. And where it feels that there are things that you feel are lacking, or that you feel like you require, pray. God will provide. God does provide, and he will provide.
Really great advice. Thanks, Judith. And Essie?
My first one literally was it's not something that you do alone, so that's something that is clearly a huge theme here. But yeah, I would say you don't do it alone. You're backed whenever you walk into something like this. You're backed by God, so like if he is for you, who can be against you? Like you're going to be okay. And also my second point was going to be like the pressure for perfection, kind of like what you mentioned before, Judith. When you're a leader, you think, I have to lead by example, which means, oh my goodness, I have to be the holiest person in the world, essentially. But it's like not true, because we're all human and we're not perfect. And so I was reminded of the Proverbs 24 verse 16, which says, the godly may trip 7 times, but they will get up again. And that is just so encouraging. That will get up again is just a beautiful reminder that like we will stumble and it will happen, but you will get up again, and God will guide you, and God will pick you up when you have literally no strength, absolutely zero in your tank, and he will pick you up and restore you and transform you. And then my third final point would be, it's okay to walk into leadership being a little bit like uneasy. Because when you walk into something, you think, oh yeah, I'm gonna be so confident, I'm gonna ace this. But naturally, a little bit of fear kicks in, and you're like, oh, am I meant to be here? Like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, how is the Lord, like, literally, like, how am I meant to lead this fear? And I have no idea what's going on. But like, it's okay to feel like that and to have, because they're natural emotions to feel, but like, reminding yourself of like the promises that God brings us, and reminding yourself that, you know, he like equips you as you're walking into that, and you don't have to feel like you're equipped being there already. So yeah, that would be my third and final point.
That's so good. Well, you know, just as we conclude this live, and one last chance, friends, if you want to join the Zoom room, you've got to do it now. I guess for me, just to summarize all of that, definitely not doing the journey on your own. But again, that release of, we just don't have to be experts in everything. Like, I remember my mentor saying to me years ago that a leader's only one step in front of everybody else. And, you know, sometimes we have this like really stupid view that leaders have to be miles further. But actually, we're all just on a journey to get to know Jesus more, aren't we? And discover his will for our life and what he wants us to do. And I think it's that as you were going thing. And I think it's that thing that says, actually, I don't have to be an expert in every single thing. I just have to do what God has called me to do, put one step in front of the other, and try not to freak out as you go. And we were at a Kyria conference on Saturday. I'll just conclude with this. We had a face-to-face conference in Scotland, which was wonderful, with 130 leaders, all different ages. And this woman said to me, she's just about to start a very prominent role, and it's her first big role in leadership, and she's quite young. She's like, Amy, I've just got no idea what I'm doing. And I leant into her and I went, shall I tell you a secret? I went, neither have I. Like, we don't know what we're doing a lot of the time, and that is okay. We need to give ourselves a break. We need to go gently in the rhythm and the love and the grace of God. Anyway, we could talk all night, because hasn't this been a great conversation? But we do need to conclude. If you've been watching this live, if you stumble across this next week or a year down the line, if you're listening to it when you're out on a run in a podcast, we hope it's blessed you. We hope it's helped you. We hope, like our mission statement says here at Kyria, that it's champions, that it's empowered, and it's released you. At any point, feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at info@kyrianetwork.com, or you can reach out via our website, which is www.kyrianetwork.com. And even if you watch this further down the line and you thought, I'd love to ask Judith this, I'd love to find out what Essie meant about that, I'd love to find out more about Youth for Christ or Beth's journey, I know that they'd be willing to answer some of your questions via us. So don't let that stop you. Whenever you're listening to this, it could even be, I don't know, 2030. So we're going to conclude. Thank you so much for watching this live. Goodbye and God bless everybody.